Okay, so Amy Goodman was in town in my hometown of Madison on May 6th at Madison Area Technical College. And I first want to share, I'm going to share 4 clips. The first one I want to share is a story of an immigrant and the struggles that she faced in the United States.
We began in Denver, and the next morning after our talk, we went over to the Unitarian Church because there Jeanette Vizquera had taken refuge. Jeanette, she's a Mexican immigrant. She came into this country more than 20 years ago, has paid taxes ever since. She has 4 kids. Her oldest daughter is a dreamer, here legally under DACA. And she took refuge in the church in February, right after Donald Trump was inaugurated president, because Daniel Ramirez was arrested in Washington State. He was a dreamer. He was legally allowed to live here and work here. And even he was arrested. And then she thought, this does not bode well. And so she went into sanctuary in the church. And I asked her how she was doing. She said she had received a lot of death threats. And so I said, well, what gives you hope? And she said, because I received so much more support than the death threats. It always makes me think of Isabel Allende, the great writer, who said, for every thug on a street in Latin America, every paramilitary, every dictator's representative in the street, there are thousands of compañeras and compañeros who will support you. That's what gives hope.
Yeah, so I thought that was really powerful. That story kind of reminds me of something I've been thinking about for a long time. I used to think that politics could solve everything. And to some extent it does. I mean, everyday activities like going to the doctor or, the price of food, your salary, your wages, all of those are determined in some way or another by the economy and our political system. But there's something more than that. Politics can't solve everything. In a large way, it's our culture, it's our relationships with other people that can really make a difference. And in the case of Jeanette, the love drowning out the hate, just with her relationships, her interpersonal relationships was really powerful. And I find that enlightening that even in a system where ICE does raids, deportations, I think under Obama there were 2.4 million deportations, somewhere in that area. Even in that sort of world, that we can still find this sort of compassion and this actual sense of safety, at least to some extent, is really enlightening. In addition, it's kind of the elephant in the room. Maybe you didn't notice it, I saw it. And I guess the camera angle kind of prohibited you, but basically 99 to maybe 100% of the people in that room were white. And the reason I bring that up is because that was like a critical point of the Sanders campaign as well. Like he's not appealing to black voters. And my take on that is you look at this Amy Goodman press conference. She is delivering an incredibly inclusive message. Like, don't get me wrong, I mean, she's talking about illegal immigration. And the 2 main topics she talked about were immigrants and the Dakota Access Pipeline, both of which most heavily affected minorities. So clearly she has an inclusive message, and longtime listeners of the show will know that, I mean, she's fought black rights, gay rights, immigrant rights, Native American rights, you name it. So it's not her message, and it's not Bernie Sanders' message that's wrong. It's something else, perhaps. It's name recognition, more affiliation with progressive movements in white communities. I can't really tell you what it is, but I don't think it's the message that's wrong, and I think that the inclusivity of Amy Goodman's message shows that it's not her fault that she's not turning out massive numbers of minority supporters. Because her message is so inclusive. Another thing I wanted to bring up was just to analyze this. I do not think that there should be any deportations. Say what you want about, border restriction and things like preventative things like that. You could argue that there could be rises in crime or loss of jobs, you name it. But the one thing I'm definitely against is deportations. So I'm very specific about that. And the reason is, if you look at it from a utilitarian point of view, like what can cause the greatest amount of good, I think clearly banning deportations causes the greatest amount of good. And again, we could argue about what we should do on the border for preventative things. And if you look at deportations, the cons are immense emotional trauma, families split apart, being put into a place where you're in severe danger in many of these Latin American countries, severe danger, severe economic stress. And the pros of deportations are maybe a decrease in crime, maybe some sort of job boost for the non-immigrant population. But there's no way that you can look at that and say that the emotional trauma and the economic trauma is outweighed by the effect on the non-immigrant population. And there's no way I think that you can look at that.